driest inhabited continent on Earth. And many of our plants have adapted to this not just poor quality soils, but a low amount of water. Now the plants on the left here, this is our dry terrace. Right along the path here we've got a couple of other terraces, but this is the dry terrace. These plants here survive on the minimal amount of water. We don't water this at all. When we plant something new here, we will water it to get it to its first summer. But after that, these guys are on their own, just whatever rain they are fortunate enough to get. And most of them, look, they're attractive garden plants. And I guess what we're trying to do, part of what we try to do here is encourage people that have gardens to grow native Australian plants because they look good and they are adapted to our soil and our climate. And in this case, low water. A couple that I'll just point out very quickly. We have the Hakia, the lovely little pink flower, the round one just down by the side of there. If the sun was out, you'd see bees buzzing around enjoying that. Behind that, it was that silver grey foliage. That's something called an Eremophila. Got a couple of Eremophilas in here. Eremophila literally is Latin for basically desert loving. They do like these. There's a couple of hundred different species of those, only found in Australia. They love those hot, dry environments, and they do grow well here. And I've got to mention the leafless rock wattle. See those lovely little yellow flowers coming out? So wattle is a genus of about 1,000 different species in Australia. Our national floral emblem is the golden wattle, actually, but that is called a leafless rock wattle. That's from Western Australia. And if you were to be able to walk up and have a close look at it, just as the name would imply, you'd discover that there are no leaves on that plant. And that's an adaptation for them to handle those harsh summers of Western Australia. Plants lose moisture through their leaves, so if you don't have leaves, if you've done away with them, you hang on to your moisture. So the greeny blue colour that you see is not leaves, that's actually the stem of the plant. And if any of the older kids here would have learnt in science class about photosynthesis, the way that plants make energy from sunlight, normally that's done through the leaves. But with these guys, it's actually done through the stems. It's quite unusual. It's quite an attractive plant. We've got a whole bunch of gum trees here, eucalypts. These are Sydney red gums, something sometimes called a smooth-barked apple. You can see how they've got smooth bark on them. And the early Europeans that settled in Sydney and were chopping these down thought that the timber resembled that of apple trees, which is why they call them smooth-barked apples. But in fact, they're not at all related to apples. They are eucalypts. Now, the raised garden beds you can see off to the left, they showcase mostly cultivars and hybrids, plants that have been selectively bred, but where human intervention has played a role in adapting these plants. None of these are plants that you would find in the wild. They are hybrids or grafted plants. And we do that to bring out certain desirable characteristics, such as the colour of the flower, or to come up with a variety that is disease resistant or drought tolerant. So those plants there are like that. The closest plant to us is a waratah. Waratah is a very pretty flower found around the Sydney region. So in spring that will come out with a lovely flower. Now, waratah is actually the state floral emblem of New South Wales. Oh, excuse me, who's trying to call me? Turn that off. But this is a hybrid. So this is actually a crossbred, a hybrid between the Sydney waratah and the Gippsland waratah. Now, the Sydney waratah has a beautiful flower, but it doesn't like the cold climate of Victoria. The Gippsland waratah, its flower is not as showy, but it handles the climate down here. So by crossbreeding the two, we've come up with a variety that handles both the cool climate of Melbourne and has a really attractive flower. Out here on the left, we have got different garden designs that have been popular here in Australia over the years. Back in the 1950s, back when my grandmother had a garden, she might have had a little cottage garden of flowers, lots of daisies, for instance. And over there you can see a little hedge, a little picket fence, and a bit of a shell of a house. Around there, we've got a 1950s style cottage garden. In the 1970s, a lot of people had what was called an Aussie bush block. Australian native plants were starting to become more popular, and people were basically recreating the Aussie bush. They plant the Australian plants, but they didn't prune them, they didn't cut them back, they didn't really think, it just chucked them in and it went a bit wild, and people inadvertently or otherwise ended up creating an Aussie bush block. Today, a lot of people don't have as much time. Most houses don't have a big garden, so a small courtyard garden, you can see a couple of grass trees there, some pavers. That's a popular design today. That's a low maintenance, easy to look after, good use of a limited space. It's a very popular design today. Now, out on the left here, you can see that there are 7 colourful poles. Each pole represents a different season from the Boonwurrung calendar. The Boonwurrung are the Aboriginal people who have lived around this part of Victoria for many, many thousands of years. And they divided their year up into 7 seasons, not 4 seasons like we tend to. The longest, coldest season is the one we're in at the moment, the wombat season. Can you see a pole over there with a wombat on it? Waring, they called it in their language, in the Boonwurrung language, it was waring. Waring goes for about 4 months, and it's a time of the year when the wombats started to emerge from their burrows. Now, you can see out on the left there, we've got some water. Actually, these trees on the left, these are actually called water gums, because these are trees that grow down by rivers usually. The water is naturally occurring water. When they mined this site, they dug it all the way down to the natural water level, the water table, and that's really why they stopped digging, because it was just all water. They couldn't get any more sand out of this site. So we decided to incorporate the naturally occurring water in the design of this garden. And all of them are considered under threat. Sadly, here in Victoria, there's about 1,300 species of plant that are considered rare or endangered or vulnerable. We're growing many of those plants here to help preserve them should something terrible happen to the natural wild populations of those species. Got a couple of little orange flowers on the right here, just a little bit past their best. That's a flowering gum from Western Australia. And speaking of flowering gums, on the left here, we've got these little mallee eucalypts. Now, mallee is an Aboriginal word, and when we're referring to the growth habit of a tree, particularly a eucalypt, what we mean is something that's not very tall, has multiple trunks, and has an open habit. More than half of all the eucalypts, they can grow a little bit bigger, but most mallees won't grow any larger than that. Of all the mallee species, and there are hundreds of them, the tallest one is about 9 metres. So more than half, often when we think of a eucalypt or a gum tree, we think of a big, tall, straight tree. And it's true, there are many that fit that description. However, more than half of all the species of eucalypts are actually mallee-type eucalypts. Now, mallee eucalypts have what's called a mallee root. It's a large tuberous root under the surface of the ground. And trees that have a mallee root are very resilient. So if a bushfire comes through and destroys a tree, even if you chop it down, they'll regrow from that mallee root. They come from the mallee region. The word mallee also refers to a region in northwestern Victoria. Poor quality soil, and these plants are adapted to. On the right here, you've got some really cool plants. Got some lots of banksias on the ground. Got these grafted grevilleas. It's very pretty, isn't it? This one here to my right that I'm pointing at, this is a variety known as a Billy Bonkers. Billy Bonkers, the guy who came up with that cultivar, he named it after his crazy dog. His dog was named Billy, and he was a bit bonkers, a bit crazy. Got a lovely, got a really nice Banksia here on the right, the Banksia ericofolia, and a native wisteria up there as well. That will come out in the flower over spring. And on the left, have a look at this purple flower on top of the wall here. This is called a pig face. That's an edible plant. You can actually eat every part of that plant. The flower and the leaves and all of it. Alrighty, now plenty more water. We're coming around the other side of the lakes at the moment. Plenty of water birds out there. This is an area we call Melaleucas spits. Melaleucas is the botanical name of these trees. Sometimes they're just little paper bark trees. If you have a look at the bark of some of these larger trees, you can see how it peels off, and it just looks like many sheets of paper. Lots of little grebes out there just flying off at the moment. The Australasian grebes, one of our native water birds, and a couple of different species of ducks there, including the Pacific black duck. Also, I think I spotted a little cormorant. There's a little cormorant sitting on his own, that black and white bird, little pied cormorant. If you look out on the left through these trees, you can see our rock pool waterway, that water that runs along there. It runs for about 120 metres, and it turns on and off about every 20 minutes. It's just replicating the monsoon cycle up in northern Australia, where when it rains, it pours, and then it goes dry for half the year. And that lovely long escarpment wall, an artistic representation of the canyons and gorges that are found in northern Australia, where the rocks are kind of that colour because of all the iron oxide or the iron ore in them. Wetlands, it's like a coastal estuary. So yes, wetlands, you are correct. Often where the rivers meet the sea, and you get these long, thin strips of sand called spits. That's what we call this Melaleuca spits, a long, thin strip made of concrete. But yeah, kind of wetlands are the spits, the estuaries that are found where rivers meet the sea. Now the path on the left you can see goes up the hill. That goes up to the Weird and Wonderful Garden. There's lots of really cool plants up there. Some really big Queensland bottle trees, some big grass trees, some rare acacias, and some interesting landscaping. Speaking of interesting landscaping, have a look at these walls around us. These are dry stone walls. So these are held together just by the weight of the rocks. There's no mortar, nothing actually gluing these things, holding these things together. Very cleverly pieced together. Making these a bit like making a jigsaw puzzle. But no jigsaw to help you. On the left there, that's our seaside garden. You can see we have 3 or 4 melaleucas that have been... We've grown sideways just to replicate what happens down by the coast. You get the strong wind off the ocean, makes the trees grow sideways. If you look carefully, you can see a pair of thorns down there, just to remind you that it's the seaside. Lots of fig trees here, something called a ficus microcarpa, or a small fruity fig. These are just planted as a shade tree. Often these are planted in northern Australia and indeed Southeast Asia as well as a street tree for shade. You can see at the left there a lawn that's very popular in summer for people to have picnics on that lawn. Passing our garden ambassador shed where our volunteers work from. And down here, if you ever find yourself having a walk around down here, we do have restrooms here. In summer there's a kiosk that's open, it's closed over winter, but we also get lots of school kids, lots of school groups coming through here. We actually have an education team, and this is one of the areas where you can get lots of school kids sitting around together, which is really good. Now these are all edible plants, bush tucker, Australian plants that you can eat. That hedge, a big hedge we've just gone past, that's a lemon myrtle. Lemon myrtle, a couple of those leaves in your cooking, in your curries, or in the sweet shortbread biscuits or cakes. Even make tea out of a lemon myrtle. This shrub next, the closest one to the bus, is a native mint, something called a prostantha. Yeah, that one there, sometimes called native oregano. It doesn't taste like oregano. Similar to mint. It looks a bit like oregano, which is I think why they call it that. Those small trees are something called lemon aspen. So that has a little bush food, little fruit. It's very citrus-like. People make jam out of them. And the lovely little ground cover, now not everybody will see this depending where you are on the bus, but at the bottom, underneath those lemon aspen, there's a really attractive ground cover. Lovely foliage, green with little copper-coloured red tips. That actually has an edible berry in some. It's called a midgeonberry, so it's a great ground cover, but also has some food as well. You can see a small citrus up there, a hybrid. You may have heard of finger lime. Finger lime is a quite a well-known Australian citrus. We have finger limes growing here as well. Pepper, strawberry gum, lots and lots of bush food in there. Remember, Aboriginal people have been living in Australia for about 65,000 years. They didn't starve. There's plenty of food around. You just got to know where to. Interesting plants here on the left-hand side. Got these dwarf-form gums. Got these little straw flowers. See these white flowers that are out here? They were closed up last time I was around. They close up when there's not a lot of white. And these are bushes just to my left. These are interesting-looking trees that are growing upside down. Can you see these? They look like skirts. That's called a knife-leaf wattle. Now, they do not normally grow like that. We have grafted those. We have forced them to grow down, just upside down, just for a bit of fun. Just a bit. Would you believe me if I told you they got up at night and walked around? No, they don't. I don't want to give you the kids nightmares. No. They have been forced. So does not naturally grow like that. Just some of our garden staff having a bit of fun. We've got some grevilleas growing on that little hedges either side of this little garden bed here, which the wattle birds enjoy. Just some, we call this a lifestyle guide, just some inspiration for designing containers or smaller spaces. Out to the right, over to the Gondwana Garden. We're going to take a look at the Gondwana Garden in a moment. And on the left-hand side here, lovely lily hedge. these are just some ideas for greening up a rooftop space, a block of units, a office block. By putting plants on the roof, you reduce the temperature in the building. It's environmentally. Out towards the left is another view of our seaside garden. On the corner here, this little silver grey foliage bush, that's called a cushion bush. If you push on that, it bounces back. It feels just like a cushion. Yeah. You can see another little pied cormorant sitting out there. They swim around and get yabbies out of the water, and then they often spread their wings to dry their wings. And here's a little Australasian grebe flying past. Last year we only had 2 of these here. Now they've been breeding, and we have quite a few of those around at the moment. Alrighty, now who doesn't love a good dinosaur story? Well, these plants here on the right, these are dinosaur era plants. Before flowering plants appeared on Earth, back in the time of the dinosaurs, even before the dinosaurs, some of these plants existed. So we're talking about things like ferns and tree ferns and conifers and cycads, all examples of plants that don't use flowers to reproduce. There are 3 small Wollemi pines there. The Wollemi pine is a rare, critically endangered Australian pine. The wild. It was a species that scientists knew about. I like to understand we're travelling through time here. We're coming up through those layers of time as recorded in the rock, leaving Gondwana land behind. We're popping out here somewhere on the east coast of Australia, where we are dominated by eucalypt forest, by gum trees. No other landscape on Earth is actually so dominated by one group of plants as we are here in Australia with our eucalypts. A gum tree or eucalypt is a predominant species in more than 3/4 of all our forested areas. So lots of gum trees around here, but also lots of shrubs and ground covers and grasses and small plants all around. These, remember, everything here is Australian. Now these gum trees around us in this section, we call this Scribbly Gum Path. You can see some pretty cool landscaping that's done here with this little Scribbly Gum Path. Scribbly gums have the name because normally what happens is that there's a number of different species of moths that lay their eggs in the bark of these trees, and the larvae, the little grub that grows from those eggs, chews its way through the bark and leaves a little scribble, a little haphazard trail where it's been. Here in Cranbourne, however, we don't get the moths, so we don't get the grubs, so we don't get the scribbles. So our scribbly gums are unscribbled. Scribbles, I don't know what they mean, but they don't have the little marks on them. Unscribbled scribbly gum. That's what we've got here. The path on our left, everything along there is plants from the Snowy Mountains and the Victorian Alps, all the high country. There's another lovely Banksia out here on the right-hand side. Banksias have their name named after Sir John, scientist who came out with Captain Cook in 1770. He went on to become the long-serving president of the Royal Society in London. Another midgeonberry, some ground cover grevilleas around here. A lovely Kunzia hedge with some great grass trees down there. That's our arid garden. Now, unfortunately, I can't get the bus down there, but if you have time for a walk, the arid garden is a place worth checking out, I think. Around us here, look at these grass trees out on the right-hand side. Now, these ones are somewhere between 400 and 500 years old. Grass tree scientists think are some of the first of the flowering plants that actually appeared on Earth. So a very ancient type of plant. Really useful for Aboriginal people, lots of foods and drinks and even weapons. Even the early European settlers used to use the resin out of the trunk of the grass trees as a furniture varnish. They're really versatile and useful plants. Now coming up through the, they look like the necks of giraffes. Look at these spots on them. Most eucalypts shed their bark in strips, but the spotted gums, they lose their bark in irregular flakes, which gives it these little splotches or spots on the trunks. Now, this section we're coming into now often has a lovely fragrance, so have a bit of a sniff. Breathe in through your nose there. You can get a nice fresh foresty smell in here, because we have a number of different eucalypts here that are known as peppermint gums. Peppermint gums have that lovely fresh fragrance. You can smell that? That's good. We've also got some prostanthus here, some of the mint bushes. There's a very pretty little coria down on the right there, that lovely little star-shaped flower on the right-hand side. Lots of lovely smelling plants there. I hope I'm encouraging you to come for a bit more of a walk later. if not today, another time. Lots of things to explore here. Now this is where it's going to get a little bit bumpy because we're going to drive over some rocks here, so hang on to the little bumps if you can while we're doing this little section. When we built these gardens about 20 years ago, we shipped in this mudstone from Mansfield to recreate a rocky landscape from the Grampians. The Grampians National Park and Mountain Range in western Victoria is home to about a third of all the plants from the state. About 1 in 3 plants from Victoria can be found in the Grampians, and about 40 different species that are not found anywhere else. And we have some of these really rare and endangered Grampians plants actually growing in this section around here. From this section you can look over towards the red sand garden as well, our red sand garden, which is of course replicating the red deserts in central Australia. I'll talk a bit more about that shortly, but I want you to have a look at the dry riverbed between us and the red sand garden. This dry riverbed, lots of rivers in central Australia have no water in them most of the time, so that was the landscaping idea behind here. Now sadly about 3 years ago we got a fungus in the soil here, and it was a fungus that killed a lot of the plants. It's a fungus that attacks the roots of woody plants, and we had to pull them out sadly. We had to replace a lot of the soil. You can never be sure that you've completely eradicated it. So the solution, they came up with a creative idea, is that they planted herbaceous plants. These are plants that are not affected by the fungus. So in the back in May, about 2 months ago, I know they put in about 2,000 new seedlings. So I'm talking about things like grasses, lots of plants in the daisy family, things called alarias, lots of kangaroo paws, brachus. They've done a really amazing job. Some of them are quite small. It might take a year or so before they really thicken up. If you are able to come back and visit in spring, there's a lot of beautiful flowers down there. And if you do go for a walk today or another time, a lovely walk to see things you haven't really seen from the bus is to walk up through the riverbed here. It finishes up at the arid garden, which I mentioned before too. Lots of plants from the desert. It's quite surprising actually. We can get them to grow here in Melbourne. There's some wonderful plants. Once you're in the arid garden, it's just a short hop down to the weird and wonderful garden, which is another area that we didn't get to see. So that's just a suggestion if you want to go for a walk. Sorry, what was that? It's important. Yeah, good question. Just for the benefit of the people at the back couldn't hear the question. The gentleman asked, was the red sand being imported? The answer is yes, but only from about 6 kilometres away. So there was another sand mine, and they were digging down, and they had this thin layer of red sand, and they didn't know what to do with it. And we said, we'll take it. However, a lot of it did blow away, so we've actually supplemented that with some crushed terracotta tiles. Got some terracotta and thin tiles that smashed them all up. And so there's a mixture of that sand that was found about 6 kilometres away and some terracotta that we've added in there, just to replicate what happens in central Australia. Check out the trees here on the right. These are ironbark. This is the natural colour of the ironbark bark. On the left-hand side, you've got a lovely little diplomelina, or something called a wise. That's a pretty little flower that comes from the deserts of Western Australia. And down on the ground, on the left too, you've got those little yellow everlasting flowers down there, which are found across a lot of Australia. And those flowers last for months, they're beautiful. And speaking of yellow flowers, on the left-hand side here's some more wattles. Now, the flowers aren't quite out, but you can see the millions of little buds on them. In a few weeks, that will be covered in yellow flowers. Very, very good. Flowers are in winter, actually. Most wattles flower in late winter, early spring. Yeah, probably August would be about peak flowering time for these, yeah. The peak flowering season for Australian plants is actually late winter, not spring. Yeah. On our right, we're passing a whole row of cycads. These are often mistaken for palms or even ferns, but cycads are a different group of plants. Cycads are a very ancient plant, and they are from New South Wales. We actually don't get cycads in Victoria. And almost back to where we started. Make sure you're looking at the left with that lovely view that you would have seen when you first go down the stairs into the garden. It is lovely, isn't it? That straight line, you can think of that like a compass pointing north. That's pointing due north. That straight line with those little chrysosetiums, those little yellow flowers. And on the horizon past the phone tower up there, you can just make out the Dandenong Ranges about 30 kilometres away due north of here. And if you're wondering why we planted things in circles there, in the deserts in central Australia, they have a grass called spinifex, and it naturally grows in circles. Now, if you've ever touched it, you'll know why we haven't planted it. We care for our gardens, and it's very spiky. It's a bit dangerous. So we planted something that's completely different. This is known as coastal rosemary or Squingia, and it's almost the same colour, and it's much easier to deal with. So we planted that to make it look like. And no, you don't want to get spiked. That's it. You want to get poked in the eye or something. Like I said, we want to look after our gardeners. They do a wonderful job. You've done something very clever here because the circles closest to us are larger than the ones down the back, which gives an exaggerated sense of depth. It makes it look like this desert is actually bigger and deeper, but further away than it really is, which plays a trick on the mind. Well, folks, sadly that is the end of our journey. Look, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me